Yes.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon as it now is. Thank you very much indeed for coming along to hear some of the expertise that we have here on the panel today to talk to you about life in the wild. This is a new publication that has been generated by some of the panelists that we have here in front of us today, and I'm sure you'll be interested not only in what they have to say, but also contributions from the audience itself are going to be equally important. What I want to do today is to run this more or less like a question time type of panel exercise. So I'm really giving you the opportunity to participate in this and really to make whatever statements or comments or questions you would like. I would like it to be questions rather than lengthy statements. So if you could confine whatever it is that you wish to query to the panel, make it fairly short and sweet, and then it gives an opportunity for other people to have their say and to make their questions also. My name is Tony Mudd, and I'm the current chairman of the Veterinary Association for Wildlife Management. We started a few years ago. We now have well over 500 supporters, and we are obviously interested in all aspects of wildlife management. But we have people on the panel today who have also a lot of experience and expertise in this context. I've asked them also to be relatively brief in whatever statements or comments they wish to make, and that will then give us more time and more opportunity for the questions and queries that you also have. So without any further ado, to thank you very much indeed for coming along today, and I'm going to hand over once again in this panel session here today to Jim Barrington, because of course Jim's wealth of background knowledge and experience in this context are going to be extremely valuable for us, and I'd like him just to make some comments for us now. Jim, over to you.
Thank you, Tony. I think it's true to say that if you ask most people what they think the difference between animals living in the wild and animals that are domesticated are, they would know. And yet, they're probably the same people who, when they see certain things on televisions, perhaps some images of hunting, shooting, or some other field sports, are the first to be horrified by those images. And that misunderstanding, and I'll call it that, seems to be prevalent not just at the public level, but also in the media and sometimes the judiciary and also the politicians as well. And what this document seeks to do is to explain some of the differences, the crucial differences of the different states in which a domestic animal and a wild animal may live. Quite often people will think of what's happening to a wild animal in terms of their own dog, perhaps even themselves. You know, quite often, I'm sure a lot of you have heard statements such as, well, how would you like it, for example, being chased? And what people are doing, of course, is putting their own feelings, or the feelings of what they think their dog or their cat or indeed a farm animal would be if that was suddenly chased and possibly killed. And it's this fundamental misunderstanding, I think, which really should have taken place many years ago, because the consequence of this misunderstanding has been, in some cases, some perverse legal judgments, and certainly some flawed legislation. And so, had these issues been looked at, and had they been explained, and had they been taken on board, we would not now be talking about repeal of the Hunting Act, because there wouldn't have been a Hunting Act, and we probably wouldn't be talking about the badger issue and whether they should be culled or not, because again, the issue simply would not have arisen had these points been taken on board. So I commend this document to you to take it away. I'm sure there are things that other people can add to it. I'm sure there will be things that people will disagree about it. But nevertheless, I think it's a very important contribution to understanding life in the wild. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Jim. We'd like to move on now and give an opportunity for Dr. Lewis Thomas, and I'll ask him just to introduce himself and give you some reasons why he is on our panel today. He's our extremely competent Secretary of Veterinary Association for Wildlife Management. I don't think we would have existed as long as we have without his very big support in this context, and I'd ask him to introduce himself, tell us why he's here, and to give us a short survey of his comments as well. Thank you, Lewis.
Tony, thank you. I think you've probably introduced me sufficiently. I'm a retired veterinary pathologist. I was in research for 30 of my years of my professional career. And we formed the Veterinary Association for Wildlife Management shortly after I retired in 2004. We started our life as something of a veterinary pressure group as vets for hunting. But it was pretty clear after a year or two that our interests were much broader in wildlife terms than just hunting. And we've morphed into the Veterinary Association for Wildlife Management. What I want to do this morning, just briefly, is to focus in on one paragraph in this document, which is paragraph 126, which it's on comparative neuroscience and comparative psychology. And the statement that both wild and domestic animals lack the complex brain and mental abilities necessary to experience fear as a human would, and the human concept of death. There is now a large body of scientific evidence to support that conclusion, and it comes from, interestingly, three totally different scientific disciplines: pathology, neuropathology, neuroanatomy, and psychology. And the interesting thing is that they all point to the same conclusion. And I've just summarised, it's very difficult to summarise what is an enormous body of scientific evidence, but one of the things that is clearly obvious is that there's massive enlargement of the prefrontal lobe of the cerebral cortex, and that is the key to the difference between animals and man. And man is in several orders of magnitude with greater brain power than wild and domestic animals. And this shows itself particularly in the realms of psychology, in self-awareness, in the ability to mental time travel and tool use. And in psychological studies, it's been shown that even mature apes, chimpanzees, only score on the level of, say, 2 to 4 year old children. And the rest of mammals score nothing as compared with man. Now I'd like to bring it to the comparison of wild to domestic animals. As we say in paragraph 111, there are obvious behavioural differences between wild and domestic animals, and I don't need to tell any country people of that, particularly the difference of domestic animals, their tolerance of restraint as compared with wild animals that are very upset by the same restraint and tracking. But there are also some anatomical and other differences which are quite clear. There's reduced adrenal gland size in the domestic animal compared with the wild animal, and I won't go into why that may be, but there is a fairly obvious explanation here. There are considerable endocrine hormonal changes between the wild and domestic animal, and sense organ structures. But the dog, Ian Addison and I have been concerned about the dog and its ability it doesn't fit the pattern. It's way ahead of chimpanzees, for instance, in its ability to relate to man. And I think this we've postulated in a paper that we gave a year ago in Bristol, we postulated that this isn't perhaps so surprising when you see how dogs have evolved from wolves over what is it, 10,000 years or so. And then we looked at, and we put the example in this paper, of the power of selection shown by a Russian experiment with silver wild foxes. And in 35 generations, they were able to turn a snarling, spitting, angry silver wild fox into a cheap, licking, happy, domestic type animal. And so we postulated that there are probably changes in the brain of the domestic dog, rather comparable to changes in man. And I won't go through them, we've listed it in the paper, and if you're interested in going into it in more detail, we've actually got the poster back on our stand. But it seems pretty clear to us that the dog has neurological ability way beyond its wild cousins. And this is probably, or certainly, a product of selection. And so our conclusion is, we haven't proven this, but we would, if we have access to a magnetic resonance imaging tool, we might put a dog through a few experiments. But we simply want to make the conclusion that there is a fundamental error to be made in treating wild animals as having the same mental reactions as our domestic relatives. Thank you, Joe.